What would you do if you saw someone die in their car while dozens of people just walked away? Would you be the hero or would you be part of the crowd? Have you ever witnessed an emergency where everyone assumed someone else would help? Have you ever felt that terrible moment when you realize nobody is stepping up to do what's obviously needed? Maybe you've been in a situation where you had to choose between getting involved and staying safe, between being a bystander and being a lifesaver. Today I'm sharing the most incredible story of courage you've ever heard. One that will completely change how you think about heroes, about class, and about what one person can accomplish when everyone else chooses to look the other way. This is the story of 17-year-old Tara, a girl who worked at a local diner to support her family, who had never met the people she was about to save, and who showed more bravery in 5 minutes than most adults show in their entire lives. But here's the question that will haunt you long after this video ends. Why did it take a teenager with nothing to save a woman worth millions, when adults with everything did absolutely nothing? If you believe in the power of ordinary heroes, hit that like button right now, because this story will restore your faith in humanity and maybe, just maybe, inspire you to be the person who steps up when everyone else steps back. Let me take you to a scorching summer afternoon in one of those busy city intersections where life moves fast and people move faster. The kind of place where everyone's got somewhere important to be, where stopping for anything feels like an inconvenience, where the unspoken rule is to mind your own business and keep moving. This is where we meet Margot Langston, a woman in her late 60s who had spent her life being the kind of person everyone respected. She was a mother of Julian Langston, a successful CEO whose name appeared in business magazines, whose company employed hundreds of people, whose family lived in the kind of neighborhood where problems were supposed to be solved with money and connections. Margot herself was known throughout their community for her grace, her warmth, and her ability to make everyone feel valued regardless of their station in life. She was driving home from a family gathering, probably thinking about dinner plans or maybe the book club meeting she had scheduled for later that week. She had no way of knowing that she was about to become the center of a life-or-death drama that would test everything our society claims to believe about helping others, about community responsibility, and about what it means to be human. Because at 2:47 p.m. on that blistering hot afternoon, right in the middle of one of the city's busiest intersections, Margot Langston suddenly clutched her chest and slumped over her steering wheel. She was having a massive heart attack. Her small sedan rolled to a stop right there in the middle of traffic, doors locked, windows up, air conditioning running. From the outside, you could see her collapse against the wheel, motionless, her breathing becoming shallow and labored with every passing second. And that's when something happened that will make you question everything you think you know about human nature. Horns started blaring. People started shouting. Cars began backing up behind her vehicle. Pedestrians stopped to stare, pulled out their phones to record, and then they walked away. Not one person, not two people. Dozens of people saw a woman die in her car, and they chose to treat it like street entertainment rather than a human emergency. Business people in expensive suits checked their watches and took alternate routes. Parents with children hurried past, telling their kids not to stare. Even a police officer directing traffic 3 blocks away didn't notice what was happening because nobody bothered to flag him down. 4 precious minutes. Minutes that could mean the difference between life and death. Margot Langston lay unconscious in her locked car while the world around her buzzed with indifference. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Tara was pedaling her beat-up bicycle home from her shift at Murphy's Diner, where she just finished serving coffee and pie to customers who barely looked at her, where she cleaned tables and swept floors for tips that would help pay her family's rent. She was tired, sweaty, and looking forward to helping her younger siblings with their homework before starting on her own. She was nobody special, just a working-class kid trying to get by in a world that rarely noticed people like her. She had no idea she was about to become the most important person in Margot Langston's life. The moment Margot's heart began to fail, time became the enemy. Medical experts will tell you that during a heart attack, every minute without treatment increases the risk of permanent damage or death. Brain cells start dying within 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. What should have been a simple rescue became a race against biology itself. But nobody in that intersection seemed to understand the stakes. Margot's car had come to rest at a slight angle, blocking part of the right lane. Her body was slumped forward, her forehead nearly touching the steering wheel, her hands fallen limp at her sides. Through the windshield, anyone who cared to look closely could see that this wasn't someone who had simply stopped to take a phone call or check directions. This was someone fighting for their life. The first person to notice was a man in a gray business suit carrying a leather briefcase. He paused for maybe 5 seconds, glanced at the motionless figure behind the wheel, then checked his watch and kept walking. He had a meeting to get to. After all, a woman pushing a stroller slowed down just long enough to peer into the car, saw Margot's condition, and quickly turned her attention back to her baby. "Don't look, sweetie," she whispered, hurrying away as if witnessing someone's medical emergency might somehow contaminate her perfect afternoon. The horn got louder. Drivers stuck behind Margot's car started shouting out their windows, their voices filled with irritation rather than concern. "Move your car." "What's wrong with this lady?" "I don't have time for this." Not one of them got out to check if she was okay. A group of teenagers with their phones already out started recording the scene, laughing about the crazy lady who fell asleep in traffic. They posted videos to social media with captions like "traffic jam" because someone can't stay awake, and "when you're too old to drive." While a woman was literally dying, they turned her medical emergency into entertainment. Even more disturbing was watching people actively avoid getting involved. A nurse getting off her shift at the nearby medical center saw the situation, recognized the signs of a medical crisis, but walked past because she was off duty and didn't want to deal with potential liability issues. A police officer directing traffic just 2 blocks away had no idea what was happening because not a single person thought to wave him down or call for help. Have you ever seen people ignore someone in crisis? Have you witnessed the bystander effect in your own community? Comment below, because what you're about to see will show you exactly why one person's action matters more than 100 people's indifference. The most heartbreaking part was watching people make excuses for their inaction in real time. "Someone else will handle it. I'm sure she's fine. It's not my responsibility. What if I make it worse?" Meanwhile, Margot's breathing was becoming more shallow, more labored. Her face was starting to take on that grayish pallor that medical professionals recognize as a sign of oxygen deprivation. Time was running out, and nobody seemed to care. Julian, waiting at home for his mother to arrive for their planned dinner, had no idea that 20 minutes away, his worst nightmare was unfolding. He was probably setting the table, maybe checking on a roast in the oven, completely unaware that every second of delay was making Margot's chances of survival smaller and smaller. This is the ugly truth about modern society that nobody wants to acknowledge. We become so disconnected, so afraid of inconvenience or liability, so convinced that helping others is someone else's job, that we'll literally watch people die rather than get involved. The bystander effect isn't just a psychology textbook concept. It's a real, deadly phenomenon that turns ordinary people into silent accomplices to preventable tragedies. Cars continued to back up behind Margot's vehicle. The honking got more aggressive. The crowd of onlookers grew larger, their phones capturing every moment for social media, their conversations filled with speculation and judgment rather than action and compassion. Some people even started complaining about being late to their appointments, as if Margot had chosen to have a heart attack specifically to ruin their schedules. But while dozens of adults with resources, education, and the ability to help were choosing apathy over action, a 17-year-old girl who had every reason to mind her own business was about to prove that heroes don't always come in the packages we expect. Because Tara was approaching that intersection, and unlike everyone else who had seen Margot's crisis, she wasn't going to walk away. Tara Rodriguez had been on her feet for 8 straight hours. Her shift at Murphy's Diner had been particularly brutal. The lunch rush that never seemed to end, tables full of demanding customers who barely acknowledged her existence, and tips that added up to maybe enough for groceries if she was lucky. Her lower back ached from carrying heavy trays. Her feet burned in shoes that were falling apart, and she still had 2 hours of homework waiting for her at home. But she was used to exhaustion. When you're 17 and working to help keep your family's lights on, fatigue becomes background noise. She was pedaling her ancient bicycle through the late afternoon heat, sweat dripping down her face, thinking about whether there was enough ground beef left in the freezer to make dinner for her mom and 2 younger siblings. Money was tight this month, tighter than usual, and every meal required careful calculation. Tara was nobody's idea of a hero. She wore second-hand clothes that she'd outgrown months ago. Her bike was held together with duct tape and prayer. Her hands were rough from washing dishes and cleaning tables, her nails short and practical rather than painted and pretty. She was the kind of person that wealthy neighborhood residents looked through rather than at, the kind of worker who blended into the background of other people's busy lives. But Tara had something that all those well-dressed bystanders lacked. She paid attention to the world around her. Growing up in a neighborhood where emergencies were handled by neighbors rather than by calling professionals, where you learned to watch out for each other because nobody else would, Tara had developed an instinct for recognizing when something was wrong. So when she approached the intersection and saw the growing crowd of people standing around taking pictures instead of helping, her exhaustion vanished instantly. Her eyes went straight to the stalled car, to the figure slumped motionless behind the wheel, to the obvious signs of medical emergency that somehow everyone else was treating like street theater. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the honking horns and irritated shouting. Tara didn't know who the woman in the car was. She didn't know about Margot's position in the community, about her son's successful business, about the comfortable life that money and connections had provided. All she saw was another human being who needed help. She jumped off her bike so fast that it clattered to the sidewalk behind her, the sound lost in the chaos of backed-up traffic and growing frustration. "Help!" she shouted to the crowd, her young voice cracking with urgency. "Someone call 911. This woman is having a medical emergency." The response she got was a collection of shrugs, annoyed glances, and muttered complaints about the traffic delay. "Someone already called, I'm sure," said a woman in designer sunglasses, not bothering to lower her phone from the video she was recording. "It's probably just heat exhaustion," declared a man in an expensive suit. "She'll be fine once the AC kicks in." "I've got a conference call in 10 minutes, complained another bystander. "Can't someone just move her car?" Tara stared at them in disbelief. Were these people actually human? Could they really look at someone who was obviously dying and worry about their schedule? She pushed through the crowd toward Margot's car, her heart pounding as she got close enough to see the woman's pale, gray-tinged face through the window. This wasn't heat exhaustion. This wasn't someone taking a nap. This was someone fighting for their life, while a crowd of strangers treated it like free entertainment. The car doors were locked. The windows were up. Margot was unconscious and unreachable. Trapped inside what had become a potential coffin, while dozens of people with the power to help chose to be spectators instead. That's when Tara made the decision that would change everything. She looked around the crowd one more time, searching for any adult who might step up and take charge. She saw expensive clothes, advanced degrees, professional success, and social status. She saw everything our society tells us should equal wisdom and leadership. What she didn't see was anyone willing to act. So the 17-year-old girl, who had never taken a first aid class, who didn't have a college education or a trust fund or connections in high places, decided that if the adults weren't going to save this woman's life, she would. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about courage, about class, and about who our real heroes actually are. Tara's eyes scanned the intersection desperately, looking for anything that could help her break into the locked car. A rock? Too small. A trash can? Too far away. Every second she spent searching was another second that Margot's brain was being deprived of oxygen. Another moment, see, that's when she spotted it, a maintenance worker's hammer, lying near a construction barrier about 15 feet away. The worker was nowhere in sight, probably on break, but his tools were scattered across the sidewalk. Tara ran toward the hammer, her worn sneakers slipping slightly on the hot asphalt. Behind her, she could hear the crowd's commentary getting louder and more obnoxious. Lose her to permanent damage, or death. What's that kid doing now? Someone should stop her before she gets in trouble. She's going to get sued if she damages that car. Even facing a life-or-death situation, their biggest concern was property damage and liability, not the woman dying, not the emergency unfolding, just protecting themselves from any potential inconvenience. Tara grabbed the hammer, surprised by how heavy it was in her small hands. She'd never broken anything on purpose in her life. She'd been raised to respect other people's property, to be careful, to not cause problems. But sometimes being good means breaking the rules. She ran back to Margot's car, positioning herself at the passenger side window, where she'd have the best angle and the least risk of hitting Margot with flying glass. "Step back," she yelled at the crowd, though most of them were already keeping their distance, more interested in filming than helping. Tara raised a hammer above her head, her arms shaking slightly from adrenaline and the weight of the tool. She'd never done anything like this before. What if she couldn't break through? What if she made things worse? What if... No, there was no time for what-ifs. She swung the hammer down with all the strength her 17-year-old frame could muster. The impact sent a shock wave up her arms, and for a terrifying moment, the glass held. A small spider web of cracks appeared where the hammer had it, but the window stayed intact. "It's not working," someone in the crowd said with what sounded almost like satisfaction. "She's too small. Someone should call her parents. She's going to hurt herself. This is ridiculous. A kid can't break tempered glass." But Tara wasn't listening to them. She was thinking about her little brother, Miguel, who had asthma attacks that left him gasping for air. She was thinking about her neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, who'd had a stroke last year, and how terrified it had been to watch someone you care about fight for their life. She raised the hammer again. The second strike hit the same spot, and the crack pattern spread wider across the glass. Still not enough, but progress. Real progress. What would you have done in Tara's position? When everyone else is making excuses and taking videos, when you're just a kid with no training and no backup, would you keep fighting? Let us know in the comments, because what she did next defines what real courage looks like. The third swing was different. Tara put her whole body into it, channeling every frustration she'd ever felt about being overlooked, every moment of watching adults fail to do the right thing, every ounce of determination that had kept her family together through hard times. The hammer connected, and this time the window didn't just crack, it exploded. Glass fragments scattered across the intersection like diamonds, the sound sharp enough to cut through the traffic noise and finally get everyone's attention. The crowd that had been standing around taking pictures suddenly jumped back, startled by the teenager's success. Some of them actually started moving forward, as if Tara's action had broken through their paralysis as effectively as she'd broken through the glass. "Oh my God, she actually did it. Is the woman okay? Someone call 911. Why do we think of that?" But Tara wasn't listening to their sudden interest. She was carefully clearing away the remaining glass from the window frame, using her sleeve to protect her hands as she created a safe opening. Without hesitation, she climbed through the broken window into the car. Margot was even worse up close. Her skin was gray, her breathing so shallow it was barely visible. Her pulse, when Tara checked her wrist with trembling fingers, was weak and irregular. "Ma'am," Tara said softly, gently shaking Margot's shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" For a heart-stopping moment, there was nothing. No response, no movement, no sign that Margot was still fighting. But then, a flutter. Margot's eyelids moved slightly, just enough to show that somewhere inside, she was still there, still alive, still worth saving. "Yes," Tara whispered, tears of relief starting to blur her vision. "Stay with me, okay? Help is coming. You're going to be fine." The crowd outside had finally awakened from their stupor. Someone was shouting into a phone, giving directions to emergency services. Others were directing traffic around the scene. A few people were even asking Tara if there was anything they could do to help. Too little, too late, but at least they were finally acting human. In the distance, the sound of sirens began to cut through the summer afternoon heat. Professional help was on the way, but they never would have made it in time if one 17-year-old girl hadn't decided that saving a life was more important than following rules, more important than avoiding conflict, more important than letting adults handle adult problems. Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is refuse to be a bystander when everyone else has given up. The paramedics arrived like a well-choreographed emergency ballet, their practiced movements a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded them. They worked with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of training and countless similar situations. Within minutes, they had Margot stabilized, loaded onto a stretcher, and racing toward Chicago General Hospital with sirens blazing and lights flashing. Tara stood on the sidewalk, still shaking from adrenaline, her clothes covered in glass fragments and sweat, watching the ambulance disappear into traffic. The crowd was finally dispersing, people returning to their important appointments, and Busa police officer approached her with a notebook, ready to take her statement about the incident. But before she could even begin explaining what happened, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Where are you?" Miguel needs help with his math homework. Real life was calling. Her shift at the diner was over, but her responsibilities at home were just beginning. She gave the officer her contact information, climbed back onto her beat-up bicycle, and pedaled home like any other day. Except this wasn't any other day. What Tara didn't know was that her 5 minutes of courage were about to change her life forever. 25 minutes later, Julian Langston burst through the emergency room doors of Chicago General Hospital, his face pale with panic and his expensive suit wrinkled from the desperate drive across town. He got him the call while reviewing quarterly reports in his corner office. The kind of phone call that stops time and makes everything else in the world suddenly meaningless. "Your mother has been brought to the emergency room. She's had a heart attack." The words had hit him like a physical blow. Margot wasn't just his mother. She was his closest friend, his wisest advisor, the person who had taught him that success meant nothing without compassion. The thought of losing her was unbearable. "Where is she?" he asked the nurse at reception, his voice barely controlled. "Margot Langston. She came in by ambulance." "Room 314, the nurse replied gently. "She's stable, Mr. Langston. The doctors are with her now." Julian ran down the hospital corridor, his mind racing with all the things he should have said, all the time he'd spent focused on business instead of family, all the dinners he'd postponed for meetings that suddenly seemed completely unimportant. Blee. Why schedules now that the drama was over? He found Margot propped up in bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, but awake and alert. Her color was better, her breathing steady. She was going to be okay. "Mom," he whispered, taking her hand in both of his. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she said softly, though her voice was weak. "Really, I'm fine." "What happened?" "The paramedics said someone found in your car, but—" "A girl," Margot interrupted, her eyes brightening slightly. "A young girl broke my window and stayed with me until help arrived. Julian, if it wasn't for her—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both understood how close they had come to losing each other. Dr. Martinez, the cardiologist on duty, entered the room with Margot's chart and a grave expression that immediately put Julian on high alert. "How is she?" Julian asked. "She's going to recover fully," Dr. Martinez said, "but I need you to understand something. Your mother suffered a massive heart attack. In cases like this, brain damage from oxygen deprivation can occur within 4 to 6 minutes. By the time the ambulance reached her, she'd been unconscious for nearly 8 minutes." Julian felt his stomach drop. "Brain damage. That's the remarkable thing," Dr. Martinez continued. "She shows no signs of neurological impairment whatsoever. Whoever found her and stayed with her during those critical minutes likely prevented permanent damage or death. Your mother is extraordinarily lucky. A 17-year-old girl named Tara," Margot said quietly. "She broke my car window when no one else would help." Dr. Martinez nodded. "The paramedics mentioned that. They said she was keeping your mother responsive, talking to her, making sure she didn't slip deeper into unconsciousness. That kind of intervention can be the difference between full recovery and tragedy." Julian sank into the bedside chair, overwhelmed by gratitude towards someone he'd never met. "Do we know anything about her? How can I find her?" "The police have her information from the incident report," Dr. Martinez said. "But Julian, you should know," the paramedic said, "there were dozens of people at the scene who did nothing. This girl was the only one who acted." That evening, as Julian sat beside his mother's hospital bed listening to her sleep peacefully, he couldn't stop thinking about the 17-year-old hero who had saved the most important person in his life. He thought about the crowd of bystanders who had chosen convenience over compassion, who had treated his mother's medical emergency like entertainment. He thought about the girl who had risked injury and legal trouble to break into a stranger's car because it was the right thing to do. By morning, he had made a decision. Finding Tara Rodriguez wasn't just about saying thank you. It was about understanding how someone so young could show more courage and humanity than dozens of adults combined. What Julian discovered when he finally tracked her down would teach him lessons about class, character, and what it truly means to be rich. Finding Tara Rodriguez proved easier than Julian had expected, but meeting her changed everything he thought he knew about heroism, about poverty, and about what his money could actually accomplish. The address from the police report led him to a neighborhood he'd never visited before, the kind of area where his expensive car attracted stares, and his business suit marked him as an obvious outsider. The apartment building was clean but worn, the kind of place where working families did their best with limited resources. Julian climbed 3 flights of stairs, past cooking smells and the sounds of families living close together, until he reached apartment 312. When he knocked, the door was answered by a woman who looked exhausted but kind. Clearly Tara's mother, Maria Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez? Julian said, suddenly feeling awkward about showing up unannounced. I'm Julian Langston. I believe your daughter saved my mother's life yesterday. Maria's eyes widened in recognition. She'd seen the news coverage, had heard the story repeated on local radio. Please come in, she said, stepping aside to let him enter their small but immaculately kept living room. Tara was at the kitchen table helping her 10-year-old brother Miguel with his homework, just like she'd been planning to do when she stopped to save Margot's life. When she looked up and saw Julian standing in their doorway, her face flushed with embarrassment. You didn't have to come here, she said quickly, standing up and smoothing down her worn t-shirt. I was just doing what anyone would do. But that's exactly the problem, Julian replied, his voice thick with emotion. Anyone should have done what you did, but you were the only one who actually did it. He pulled out a chair at their small kitchen table and sat down across from Tara, treating her like the hero she was rather than the child everyone else saw. The doctors told me that without your intervention, my mother would have suffered permanent brain damage or died. You saved her life, Tara, not the dozens of adults who walked away, not the people with medical training, who didn't want to get involved. You. Tears started rolling down Julian's cheeks. Something that would have been unthinkable in any boardroom meeting, but felt completely natural in this moment of genuine gratitude. I want to help your family, he continued. Not as charity, but because someone who shows that kind of courage deserves to have opportunities. What are your plans for college? Tara looked at her mother, then back at Julian. College isn't really an option for us right now. I need to keep working to help with rent and groceries. Maybe community college in a few years, when Miguel's older. Julian felt something break inside his chest. Here was someone with more character and bravery than most people he knew in business, and she was going to miss out on education because of money, something he spent without thinking. What if money wasn't a factor? He asked. What would you want to study? Nursing, Tara said immediately, then looked embarrassed by her quick answer. I've always wanted to help people, and yesterday when I was with your mother, keeping her awake until the paramedics came, I knew that's what I want to do with my life. Have you ever seen someone's life completely transformed by one act of courage? Have you witnessed a moment when opportunity meets preparation and character? This story proves that heroes come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes they need heroes of their own to help them succeed. Within a week, Julian had established a full scholarship fund for Tara that would cover not just her undergraduate education, but medical school if she chose to pursue it. He arranged for SAT prep courses, college application assistance, and a summer internship at the hospital where his mother had been treated. But the changes went far beyond Tara herself. The story of the 17-year-old hero had captured the city's imagination. Local news stations feature her bravery. Social media posts about her courage went viral. The mayor presented her with a Citizens Heroism Award at a ceremony attended by hundreds of people. More importantly, her example sparked conversations across the city about the bystander effect, about community responsibility, about the difference between having wealth and having character. Julian used his business platform to launch the Everyday Heroes Initiative, a program that recognized and supported people who showed extraordinary courage in ordinary circumstances. Tara became the first recipient, but she wouldn't be the last. Schools began incorporating bystander intervention training into their curricula. Emergency preparedness courses saw enrollment surge. The story of one teenager's courage had awakened an entire community to their responsibility for each other. But perhaps the most beautiful change was in the relationship between the Langston and Rodriguez families. Julian and Margot didn't just offer financial support. They offered friendship, mentorship, and genuine respect for family that had given them back their future together. What started as a thank you visit became regular dinners, holiday celebrations, and the kind of cross-cultural, cross-class friendship that proves character matters more than background. Tara's life had been transformed overnight, but she'd also transformed the lives of everyone around her, proving that real heroism creates circles of positive change that extend far beyond the original act of courage. 5 years later, Tara Rodriguez graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern University's nursing program, with Margot and Julian Langston sitting proudly in the front row of the ceremony alongside her own family. But this story isn't really about the scholarship or the career opportunities, or even the life-changing generosity of a grateful family. This story is about something much more fundamental. The moment when one person decided that someone else's life mattered more than their own comfort, convenience, or safety. Today, Nurse Tara Rodriguez works in the same emergency room where Margot Langston was treated 5 years ago. She saved dozens of lives, trained countless medical students, and become known throughout the hospital for her ability to remain calm under pressure and her willingness to go above and beyond for every patient. But ask her about her biggest accomplishment, and she'll tell you it happened when she was 17 years old, riding a beat-up bicycle home from a minimum wage job, when she chose to see a human being in crisis instead of an inconvenience to avoid. Margot Langston made a complete recovery and lived to see her son get married, to meet her grandchildren, and to celebrate her 80th birthday surrounded by 2 families, her own and the Rodriguez family that had become part of her heart. She never forgot that her extra years of life were a gift from a teenager who refused to walk away. Julian transformed his entire business philosophy after meeting Tara. His company now prioritizes community service, emergency response training for all employees, and scholarships for working-class students who show exceptional character. The Everyday Heroes Initiative has recognized over 300 people whose courage in crisis situations help save lives and strengthen communities. But perhaps the most important lesson from this story isn't about individual heroism at all. It's about the society we create when we choose action over apathy, when we value character over status, when we recognize that true wealth is measured in the lives we touch rather than the money we accumulate. Think about the dozens of people who walked past Margot's car that day. They weren't evil. They weren't heartless monsters. They were ordinary people who have been trained by modern society to mind their own business, to avoid getting involved, to assume that helping others is someone else's responsibility. They were the product of a culture that teaches us to protect ourselves first and worry about our neighbor second. Tara was different not because she was superhuman, but because she was raised in a community where looking out for each other wasn't optional. It was essential for survival. She understood something that wealth and privilege had taught the other bystanders to forget. We're all connected, and what happens to one of us affects all of us. So here's the challenge I want to leave you with. The next time you see someone in crisis, the next time you witness an emergency, the next time you have to choose between getting involved and walking away, remember Tara Rodriguez. Remember that heroes aren't born. They're made in the moment when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear, because someone else needs you to. Remember that the difference between being a bystander and being a hero is often just one decision, one moment of choosing compassion over convenience. If this story has inspired you to be the person who steps up when everyone else steps back, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Earthly Tales for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because in a world that often rewards selfishness and celebrates indifference, we all need reminders that the most important thing you can do with your life is use it to make someone else's life better. Sometimes the biggest impact you'll ever make happens when you're 17 years old, exhausted from work, riding a beat-up bicycle, and you choose to see a fellow human being who needs help instead of another inconvenience to avoid. Because real heroes don't wear capes or have superpowers. They just refuse to walk away when someone else needs them to stay.